seems was never fair. I'd rather be this starving artist, experience life now at its farthest. One blue sky, we are under, torn and shred now, ripped asunder. The politics, war and famine. I thank God I'm still here jamming. Train your mind.
You know, once upon a time, I actually conducted legitimate science. That, however, was before I got into really obscure philosophy, meaning that the really rigid and structuralized reality that I lived within was no more like this concrete absolutism. It was more so of like this fluffiness of a cloud that seemingly had no shape and was unbound and really wasn't restricted to anything. I mean, I saw the pointlessness of everything, in that literally, in the grand scheme of all that is, nothing really has an impact on anything. But at the same point in time, everything can be housed within one point. I mean, after all, what does science explain that the Big Bang is? I mean, it's everything housed within a single point of existence that didn't exist. But at the same point that things already were, they weren't. You know, stuff like that. And so what actually ended up occurring was I got into all of this really, really touchy science. Like exploring, you know, the inner soul, so to speak, and the connected nature between all things, yet how the separate nature of all things allows us to experience all things. But at the same point in time, everything comes from the same place and everything goes pretty much to the same place. It's just all different locations of the same thing experiencing different times, which time itself is a place. So literally a location and a thing itself is literally just another time in the timeline of this all experiencing spirit, which we call life, in which it's merely just another time, so to speak, along the grand timeline of what people either call energy or God. You know? So anyways, before I got into all of that type of stuff, you know, trying to resonate with certain frequencies to allow myself an enlightenment of a euphoric nature in which I could actually find myself on differing dimensional planes based upon the actual physical materials which resonated at different frequencies, and surrounding myself with these things, allowing myself to pretty much ascend towards new heights, allowing new forms of consciousness from the microcosmic level up to the cosmic level. I was actually doing legitimate scientific research. And what I was actually doing was nutritional genetics. I was actually working towards getting published in, you know, the journal Nutrition, and a nutritional genetics scientific journal. And my research was focused around the concept of mankind evolving with and around actual, you know, food sources themselves. And, you know, it was only within, like, the past, 500 or so years in which intercontinental travel became, you know, a fairly accessible thing for most societies and peoples. And with this, the transportation of food sources, biochemically active substances, intercontinentally as well, along with peoples. And as this actually occurs, then what happens is that people are now able to come in contact with substances that they wouldn't normally have come in contact with. And so this creates a lot of issues because food itself is the greatest medicine that we partake of. It literally alters our chemical makeup, the actual chemicals released by your brain, which influence other portions of your body, as we ingest these materials. And what I was researching was the relation between diabetes in Native Americans and their diet. In that diabetes is actually a negative side effect of consuming foods which aren't native to the lands which the Native Americans have inhabited for a long amount of time, in which they co-evolved with the food sources around them. And it's called nutritional genetics. And so what I was actually looking at was a gene called the dipolypeptidase 4 gene. And I was looking at statistical or significant differences between ethnic groups. And so what I would do is I would actually take genetic samples of individuals, and then I would do a survey with the individuals identifying their racial characteristics and their BMI, a lot of their dietary habits, and then also illnesses they've been diagnosed with and things to this extent. And what I was doing is I was trying to show or see if there was a significant difference, looking at all of this in comparison to my null hypothesis. I was looking to see if there was an actual difference in what was called single nucleotide polymorphisms within individuals in regards to the dipolypeptidase 4 gene, which actually codes for a protein which helps in the metabolism of products that contain gluten. Because before the colonization of the Americas, there really was no gluten-based food sources within the continent itself. And so what I was showing is that the peoples here co-evolved with the food sources here, and as soon as these other food sources, which were biochemically active substances, were introduced into their diet, and then also their lifestyles were changed, instead of being a hunter-gatherer, they're now placed on reservations and don't know what to do pretty much 99% of the day. They're not migrating with the seasons across the land and with the animals anymore, so they're living this whole sedentary lifestyle and an extreme diet change as well. The side effect of this is diabetes pretty much. And anyways, I was looking to see if there were genetic differences on the makeup of this gene itself in regards to nucleotides. These are single nucleotides within a gene which codes for a protein which metabolizes gluten. And I was showing that certain peoples with diabetes actually can't necessarily break down these specific types of foods or these drugs or these medicines, because food is a drug, it's a medicine. It alters your conscious state and biochemically activates certain mechanisms within your body which release other chemicals which have this whole chain reaction effect, which is all a drug is. And so the side effect of coming in contact with a substance that they weren't evolved with or have the ability to handle actually causes illness. And so I was trying to come up with a way in which the very diverse makeup of the American population itself, I was pretty fed up with seeing people say, this is the best diet, this is the best type of thing. I was super heavily into diet and exercise and all of these other things, being the most physically fit and capable individual, within books, and then within the gym and then outdoors as I could be. And I was sick of hearing everybody say, this is the best thing for you, this is the best thing for you. So I was working on developing a test in which it would actually make, an ancestral profile, and it would look at the genetic makeup of the genes which code for metabolism of food particles. And then what it would actually do is it would look in relation to your ancestral history and your genetic makeup and show you the diet which ancestrally your people co-evolved with, so that you could literally have the most effective and efficient diet possible in relation to your chemical and biological makeup itself. And I thought this would be something that would be, a huge advantage for the American population, because it's such a biologically diverse population. I mean, go around different portions of the world, and it's pretty much like you're looking at almost a very specialized population. There's not really much biodiversity. America is what it is because everybody from all these specialized areas traveled to one area, and now we have what's called the melting pot. That's why it's called the melting pot. And so I was working on, people being able to spit into a vial, send it into a lab. They'd get their results back, which would give them some ancestral, relation in regards to the foods in which they could consume. And it's all just advice. It's not necessarily like you have to do this, otherwise the government's going to come and shoot you. No, it's people wanting to see what was best for them, not necessarily watching the news and people coming up with some generalized statement for a statistical norm or an average within a set standard deviations, saying that you should eat this type of food. Well, that doesn't apply towards a population like the United States of America, which itself is made up of such a broad range of individuals, and even within a set population which seems to have the same, morphological, phenotypical, biological characteristics on the outside, people are still made up by a lot of different factors. Me, myself, I did a genetic test through 23andMe, and I'm like the biggest mutt in history, I've got family coming from all over Europe, India, China, Native American, Africa, all of these other places. And it's like, you would look at me and just be like, oh, he's white, but the fact of the matter is that my genetic makeup, which codes for all my proteins, is this modge podge of all these different things. So it's like, how are you going to tell me what is best for me when you don't even really know what it is that I am? And so I was working on a simple product which could be used effectively on the individual level for all these different populations. But that was before I got into this whole spirituality of all things and saw the meaningless nature in everything, and decided, to drop out of school, and I decided to get rid of all the sexual diseases within my life, because I sat there and thought and pondered, and I was like, why the heck am I striving towards all this success? What is it that is actually motivating me towards, being super physically fit, bench pressing, 225 easily, and, squatting the same, and having like amazing short distance running times and all these different things. And I just thought, it's my want and desire to procreate. The female was motivating me towards all of these endeavors. And then I thought for just a split second, I was like, what if I take the female out of the equation? Well, then what the heck is motivating me anymore? I don't necessarily have the desire to procreate or literally have a relationship with a woman. And so I literally have no more desire, because I felt spiritually connected with everything, and I almost felt like I was immortal already, because it's like, where does everything go anyways? Nothing can really dissipate from what it is. I am what I'm always have been, sort of thing, getting into that whole spirituality and philosophy and everything. And it's just like, well, then what the heck really is my desire for the woman? It's just some internal biological nature for me to feed my carnal self, following my erection wherever I go. And it's like the Fruit Loops, whatever, character saying follow your nose. It was like I was just following my dick. And I was like, this is pointless and meaningless. Is really the whole point of life just to, have babies and go to 9 to 5 and do whatever, and sit there and like I guess, watch your kids raise up and go through everything you went through. And I felt like so empty when I analyzed it that way. And so I tried to like search for this whole spiritual meaning behind everything. And that really put a halter on my education. You know, I was pretty much a 4.0 student, getting awards left and right. The president of science clubs, president of journal clubs and all these different things, the president of National Leadership Honor Societies and everything like that. And then I just kind of went off the deep end in regards to all of that stuff and put it on the side shelf, you know, and found myself, you know, winding up in jail because I was urban camping and traveling across the country. Went on a, you know, spreading philosophy and spiritual teachings across the country, and ended up one night being so exhausted that I accidentally camped in somebody's backyard, and the police had been following me for a while, because who wouldn't be following somebody walking through their town with a backpack on and like and also training equipment for their body and all this different stuff. And I'm going around speaking things to people that have just, you know, normal 9-to-5 jobs or whatever. You know, they go to work, come home, watch TV, and go to sleep. And I'm sitting there saying like, oh, well, you know, talking about eternity and everything like that. And so I make one mistake and get tired enough that I walk off the road into some set of woods, ends up being somebody's backyard. Well, the police now have reason, you know, or, you know, cause to take me in. And so I spend, you know, a month in jail, and then end up finally convincing my way and getting myself out of that whole endeavor after being forcefully injected with a bunch of drugs and a bunch of other nonsense. Pretty traumatic experience coming home, and then really being pissed off at society after that, and finding that, like, feeling like I had no liberty or freedom. And so literally I pushed it as far as I could after that. It was like a child getting spanked for getting in trouble, but then he was like, oh, you're gonna spank me? Well, now I'm gonna do even worse, you know, worse things than what you spanked me for. And so I went and I like started making a bunch of things with all my scientific knowledge that I learned in my organic chemistry classes, and going around and doing a bunch of stuff with that. It was kind of like Breaking Bad, but in real life. And anyways, got in quite a mess of trouble for that. Ended up in some behavioral correctional facilities for quite some time, a couple months. You know, the same thing kind of happened over again, where I was forcefully injected with a bunch of psychotropic medications and other things like that. And I'll tell you what, those things are not pleasant. Like, people say they have bad trips on like certain types of drugs. Well, these things literally, you can't have a good trip on them. Like, that's what they are. It's just like, they like, you know, the whole experience just compounds on itself as well, where it's like you're being injected with these things, but then also it's like you're taken off the streets, like, and then you're placed in like prison, and then you're backed into a corner like you're an animal at, you know, the animal shelter who's been picked up by animal control, so to speak, because you're kind of wandering around and you don't necessarily have a home. But who's to say who the earth actually belongs to? Isn't all our homes? Well, anyways, it's like, you know, then we get into a whole host of other issues where it's like the police force has to come up with all these other excuses and rules and regulations to feed their own organization, otherwise it would die. And so you can't, you know, step on anybody else's toes without winding up in some sort of financial crisis with the state. And it's like being placed in a hotel where you were forcefully placed there, and as soon as you get out, it's like, this wasn't my choice to come and stay here, but you still have to pay for your stay. That's what it's like. And it's like God picking you up and putting you on his lap and pulling down your pants and spanking you really, really hard. And I'll tell you what, like, it'll teach you to really think about every action that you participate in before you do it, because it's like you never want to end up in that circumstance and situation ever again. And, you know, I kind of did the same thing while I was in those places, in those correctional facilities. I just got in there and I was just like, you're a bunch of assholes, and I'm going to show you that you're all just a bunch of fucking idiots. And so, you know, I was questioning everything that they were saying. I was showing them that, you know, they themselves. So yeah, I had somebody call me, which interrupted the video, so I hope I can somewhat seamlessly link this to what I was previously ranting upon, and I left off with the notion of God spanking me. And if you look at God as literally the collective intelligence of a lot of different things, then as you push against reality and as you push the boundaries of reality itself, then reality is going to kind of push back. And that was what was actually occurring, was literally society itself was looking at me, and I wasn't playing by the rules that they thought were lawful. And, there's a lot of things that go into that. Maybe people are jealous because they say, well, he's doing this, why can't I do this? And so therefore, I'm going to literally enforce the fact that he has to do what the rest of us do. And so that's God putting you up on his lap and spanking the living, hell out of you. And anyways, that's pretty much the gist of what it was that I wanted to talk about. Before I got into this whole spiritual nature of things, I was pretty much your typical, go to school, want to become a doctor type of guy. And now I'm all about, why is it that I have like dreams when I'm asleep, and it's like I wake up in like a place that's restricting. It's almost like, the more pleasant place is when I'm in slumber rather than when I'm awake. And it's like, I fly in my dreams and I can manipulate reality with mere thought and all of these different aspects, and then when I wake up, it's like I'm powerless. And if I could, I'd be like this superhero that went around and had all power and was able to genetically manipulate and formulate creatures of my own conception. But no, I'm like this powerless nothingness, which literally has no effect on anything and just has to go and slave around and do whatever it is that I'm told. Otherwise, I'm going to get, shackled up and placed into a position which I have even less freedom. And, the whole notion of you're free to speak whatever it is that you want is really only in regards to, you're free to say whatever you want while in jail or in prison. It's like, yeah, you can say whatever you want over here, but don't do it over here. And liberty itself is a very complex thing. It's almost like a free will, because, you have free will, but your will is only as strong as the opposition which is pushing against your will, meaning that other people have will as well, and literally it's your will against theirs. The same thing with liberty. It's like I'm at liberty to do things until I'm infringing upon other people's liberty. And so I'm really, not at true liberty because I'm susceptible to the liberty of others and what others deem to be true liberty, and what should actually be in liberty itself, or at liberty to do. So yeah, anyways, stay away from drugs, but realize that the most powerful drug is your voice and your words, which can influence people's minds and affect their behavior. And if anybody tells you that television is not the most psychoactive drug that you can currently partake in, then they don't know what they're talking about. And also watch out for sexually transmitted diseases. And no, I myself have never been afflicted with a sexually transmitted disease. And I'm not a virgin either. I've just been careful about what I've done. But in these terms, philosophically and metaphorically speaking, I've been highly afflicted with sexually transmitted disease. Because as soon as I got onto this whole philosophical nature of things, reading The Art of War, reading Martin Gardner's The Whys of a Philosophical Scrivener, reading through the Bible and other scriptural texts, not just Christian belief systems, reading into Plato, reading into Aristotle, reading into Augustine, reading into Augustus and all these other facets, and Claudius and all these other things, I was like, what is it that's motivating me to literally try and excel within life? What is motivating me to try and go hard? There's a reason why your dick gets hard when you're trying to have sex with a woman. There's a reason why you yourself go hard. It's because you're trying to please the opposing sex. So that way, just like all other creatures, you can, in a sense, attain the most fit individual. And the most fit individual is going to be attracted to the most fit individual. So I myself am going to try to be the most fit individual. And that is in regards to my position, my circumstances, my status within life, my financial holdings, my ability to provide for somebody, my ability to show my mental fitness, my ability to show my physical fitness. And to acquire all of those things, it's very difficult. And so sexuality itself is this driving force behind becoming hard like an erection so that you can impregnate somebody with your genes and pass on what it is that made you who you are, and that is to become hard. And so I was like, this is all fucking pointless. What the hell am I doing any of this shit for? And I realized that I had a sexually transmitted disease, and that sexuality was driving me to become hard, because why else was I being motivated to achieve all of these things other than to acquire a mate, which I myself deemed as fit? And the only mates that I myself find appealing are those which would only find what it was that I deemed to be very difficult, that they would actually be appealed towards. And so I had to acquire the difficulty myself, and I had to become hard, and my life became very, very hard trying to actually appeal towards the sexes, or the opposite sex. And so there you have it. That's how sex itself and sexuality is a sexually transmitted disease in and of itself, because it requires you to be a very hard individual for you to actually, intermingle your genetic makeup with another fit individual. And it's like this whole game of just trying to be the most fit, which is a very difficult thing to actually accomplish, which requires you to go very hard before you can impregnate somebody. And so yeah, anyways, I just saw meaninglessness in that, and dived into the whole philosophy of being an eternal thing already, and recognizing immortality, and how, like in Schrodinger's cat, there is no existence that you don't exist within, sort of thing. You can't be unconscious or conscious of unconsciousness, and so therefore the only thing you can be conscious of is your own self-awareness and consciousness of yourself. And in this, you're eternal, looking at the whole laws of thermodynamics and understanding that nothing is created nor destroyed. It's only transformed. Death is merely a transformation of what you once were. It's growth, type of thing, yada, yada, yada. The only thing that dies is your ego, not your spirit. Looking into like other religious belief systems. Well, there you have it. I gotta go. Otherwise, I may be enforced with consequences upon my actions of taking the time to express my thoughts rather than going and slaving away like everybody else does. So, peace out. So yeah, don't strive towards attaining an attractive mate through sexuality, and your life will become fairly easy, and Darwin's theory no longer is applicable to you in your life. And you can come to the realization that sometimes smart people act stupid because they realize that if you're stupid, you actually have more, because you're required to do less, or less is required of you. And the less that is required of you, the more you're able to do what it is that you want, while hiding how smart you actually are, because as soon as people realize that you're a capable individual, they'll want to put you to work, because they're like, why the hell is he doing this? He is a capable individual who can understand things. He can conceptualize what's going on. He can reason. He has, some sense of logic and rational ability and rational thinking and thought process. Well, why the hell is he getting to go around and do whatever he wants? So you have to kind of dumb down what it is that you're doing before people get wise that you're being unwise on purpose, and otherwise they're going to put the tools in your hands and say, get to work, And it's kind of this whole contradiction, because it's like, you have less because you're making less, so to speak, if you're acting stupid, because you have like less assets, right? But on the same, on the other side of the coin, of the same coin, it's like you actually have more because people don't hold you to anything. They say, oh, he doesn't have to be responsible or whatever. And so you literally don't have to be responsible because people are like, he's unable to be responsible, and so he shouldn't be held responsible. He literally doesn't understand what's going on, and so why hold him accountable for what he did or what he does? And as this becomes more of your reality, then it's like you actually are more free than people who go around acting smart and have assets. It's like living in a small house, but in actually having to maintain less of a home, you're actually able to enjoy more of the world because less of your time is spent in maintenance of your own facility, and so you get to enjoy all the other facilities that are out there while everybody else has to maintain the facilities that you're enjoying, rather than you being the housekeeper of your huge ginormous home. But in doing so, your entire life is spent maintaining your home rather than enjoying it. And it's like another day, another dollar, but if all your days are spent making dollars rather than spending the dollars that you make, then what's the point in making money in the first place, right? So yeah. Well, yeah, later, y'all.
Train your mind, now hear my words. Twitter paid in little birds. If you've kept up with all my posts, then your life's just like a ghost, already dead in the machine. The screen and life one's in between.